The storm came without warning, like the planet itself had decided to turn against those who lived on it. Snow slammed against metal walls, and the wind screamed through the narrow streets of the frontier settlement. Most lights were already off. People here learned to stay inside when the cold grew angry. Relon worked alone in his small workshop, his hands stiff and red from the cold. The heater in the corner flickered weakly, barely alive. Shelves around him were filled with old toys, broken parts and half-finished creations that no one wanted anymore. Children had stopped coming years ago. Families moved away. The world grew quieter. Just as Relon prepared to close for the night, a sound cut through the wind. Scratch. He froze. Another scratch followed, weak and slow, almost lost beneath the storm. Relon frowned and leaned closer to the door. No one came out during storms like this. No one sane, at least. Then came a sound that made his chest tighten. A soft whimper. Relon hesitated. Helping others on this planet often led to trouble. Still, he reached for the door latch and pulled it open just enough to look outside. The wind rushed in like a living thing. Snow piled high against the doorway. And there, curled against the metal wall, was a small shape. At first, Relon thought it was a strange animal. Then the shape moved and two dim, glowing eyes looked up at him. It was a dragon child. She was small, no bigger than a human child of 6. Her scales were dull and cracked with cold, their usual color hidden beneath frost. Thin wings were wrapped tightly around her body, shaking hard. Steam escaped her mouth with each shallow breath. Relon's heart pounded. Dragons were feared here. Stories said they burned cities, drained energy from machines, and destroyed entire colonies. Many believed even a young one was dangerous. The child tried to stand but failed. She collapsed with a weak sound and pressed her forehead to the ground as if expecting pain. Relon stood there, torn between fear and something deeper. If anyone saw this, he could be arrested. Worse, dragons were taken away. No one knew where they went. Another strong gust of wind slammed snow into the doorway. The dragon child let out a quiet cry. Relon made his choice. He opened the door fully and stepped outside. The cold bit into his bones, but he ignored it. He crouched slowly, keeping his movements calm. The child watched him closely, her glowing eyes wide and afraid. "It's all right," he said softly, though his voice shook. "I won't hurt you." She didn't understand the words, but she seemed to understand the tone. She did not move away. She barely had the strength. Relon carefully lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, almost fragile. Her body was ice cold. Too cold. She trembled violently in his arms. He carried her inside and shut the door behind them, sealing out the storm. The workshop was dim and cluttered, but it was warmer than outside. Relon laid the child near the heater, wrapping her in old cloths and blankets. The heater sputtered and hummed, struggling to give heat. The dragon child watched everything. Her eyes followed his hands, the light, the moving shadows. She did not attack. She did not even growl. She was just cold. Relon moved quickly. He broke apart an old toy robot, removing its power cell. He connected it to the heater, forcing more energy through the system. Sparks jumped and the heater glowed brighter. The warmth spread slowly. The dragon child relaxed a little. Her shaking eased. She made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. Relon sat on the floor beside her, rubbing his hands together. His breath came out slow. Only then did he realize how close he had come to turning her away. He noticed scars along her small arms and legs. Old ones. Burn marks. Claw marks that did not belong to animals. His jaw tightened. Someone had hurt her. Outside, lights moved through the snow. Patrol drones. Their beams cut through the storm like sharp knives. Relon's body stiffened. He dimmed the workshop lights at once and moved the child farther from the windows. She sensed the tension and tried to crawl closer to him. Her small claw wrapped weakly around his sleeve. That simple touch broke something inside him. "It's okay," he whispered again. "I won't let them take you." The drones passed by, unaware. Their lights faded into the storm. Relon let out a slow breath. He looked down at the child. She stared back, no longer afraid, just tired. Her eyes slowly closed as the warmth reached her core. She slept. Hours passed. The storm continued, but the workshop held. Relon stayed awake, feeding energy into the heater when it threatened to fail. His own fingers grew numb. He used his coat as an extra blanket for her. At some point she stirred. Her eyes opened, clearer now. She looked at him, then at the heater, then back at him. She made a soft sound and pressed her forehead lightly against his arm. Relon swallowed hard. He had nothing to give her but warmth. No medicine. No food fit for a dragon. No protection beyond his thin walls and quiet hope. but he gave her what he had. As dawn slowly approached, the storm began to weaken. Pale light slipped through the frosted windows. The dragon child slept peacefully, her breathing steady. Relon looked at the broken toys around him. The empty shelves. The cold walls. He knew this moment had changed everything. The child had chosen his door, out of all places on this frozen world. And he had opened it. Outside, the snow settled. Inside, something old and powerful had begun. Not fire. Not fear. Just warmth. Morning arrived slowly, as if the sun itself was unsure whether it should rise over such a cold world. Pale light crept through the frosted windows of the workshop, painting everything in soft gray. Relon had not slept. He sat on a low stool beside the heater, watching the dragon child breathe. The heater gave a weak hum. Its light flickered, tired and unstable. Relon knew it would not last much longer. He had already pushed it beyond safe limits. Still, the warmth it gave was the only thing keeping the child alive. The dragon child shifted under the blankets. Her wings moved first, unfolding slightly, then wrapping back around her small body. Her eyes opened slowly, no longer dim, but still cautious. She looked at Relon and did not pull away. "That's good," he said softly. "You're warmer now." She tilted her head, listening to the sound of his voice rather than the meaning of his words. Her stomach made a faint sound. Relon noticed and frowned. Food. That was a problem. He searched through his workshop. There was no fresh food, only dried ration packs meant for humans. Dragons were different. He did not know what she could eat. Carefully, he opened a ration pack and warmed a small portion near the heater. He placed it on a metal plate and slid it toward her. She sniffed it, then looked up at him. Her eyes were not afraid. They were questioning. Relon shrugged slightly. "It's all I have." She touched the food with one claw, tasted it and pulled back. "Not good." She made a quiet sound and nudged the plate away. Relon sighed. "I thought so." He thought harder. Dragons, from what little he knew, were drawn to energy. Power. Not just food. An idea formed. He returned to his shelves and began pulling apart old toys. Broken music boxes, small walkers, light-up figures that no longer worked. He gathered power cells, wires, and metal frames. One by one he broke them down, sorting pieces on the floor. The dragon child watched closely. Her eyes followed every movement. When a toy's light flickered before going dark, she leaned forward, curious. Relon worked carefully. He built a small energy coil, nothing strong enough to be dangerous, just enough to release steady warmth. He placed it near the heater and connected it. The coil glowed softly. The air warmed. The dragon child's wings relaxed at once. She moved closer, placing her small hands near the glow. A faint shimmer passed through her scales as if they were waking up. Relon smiled tiredly. "That's better, isn't it?" She let out a soft sound, almost like a hum. The heater sputtered again. Relon's smile faded. He knew what he had to do. He knelt beside the heater and opened its panel. It was old, patched together many times. He removed the main power unit and stared at it for a long moment. This was the last real heater he had. Without it, the workshop would freeze. He pulled it free anyway. He connected the power unit to the energy coil instead, increasing its strength. The coil brightened, releasing deeper warmth that spread through the room like a slow wave. The dragon child let out a startled sound, then relaxed. Color returned to her scales. Her breathing grew steady and strong. Relon pulled his coat tighter around himself. Cold bit at his skin. Hours passed. The workshop grew quieter. The storm outside had ended, but the cold remained sharp. Relon's hands shook as he worked, but he kept busy. He repaired toys, cleaned parts, and adjusted the coil whenever it weakened. The dragon child began to move more freely. She tested her legs, standing unsteady at first, then walking small circles around the warm glow. She picked up a toy Relon had fixed, a small mechanical animal that walked in short steps. She tapped it. Moved. Her eyes widened. A soft laugh escaped her, high and surprised. Relon froze. He had not heard laughter in this place for years. She looked at him, then pushed the toy toward him as if sharing the moment. Relon chuckled quietly. "You like it?" She nodded, copying his movement without knowing its meaning. Later, she grew tired again and curled near the coil. Relon noticed her shivering had stopped completely. But now his own teeth began to chatter. He sat against the wall, wrapping his arms around himself. Lights passed outside again. Slower this time. Closer. Patrols. Relon dimmed the workshop once more. The dragon child noticed and crawled toward him, pressing against his side. Her body was warm now, warmer than the air around them. She wrapped one wing around his arm. Relon stiffened at first, then slowly relaxed. Her warmth soaked into him, easing the cold in his bones. "You're helping me now," he whispered. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Outside, voices echoed faintly. Boots crunched through snow. Someone paused near the workshop. Relon held his breath. The energy coil hummed softly, almost alive. After a long moment, the footsteps moved on. Relon exhaled shakily. The dragon child shifted and made a quiet sound, as if sensing danger had passed. She looked up at him, then pointed at herself. "Kivra," she said slowly, the words rough and new. Relon's eyes widened. "Is that your name?" She nodded. "Kivra," he repeated gently. She smiled. Something inside Relon's chest warmed that had nothing to do with heat. The day ended in silence. The workshop stayed standing. The coil kept glowing. Relon stayed awake, guarding the door, fixing scraps, feeding warmth into the small dragon who trusted him. He had no plan. No safety. No promise of tomorrow. Only broken toys, cold walls, and a choice he would not take back. Warmth made of scraps was still warmth, and for Kivra it was enough. Days passed slowly in the small workshop at the edge of the frozen settlement. Outside, the snow had melted to a thin layer of ice, but the cold remained sharp. Inside, warmth pulsed from the energy coil, spreading through the room like a gentle heartbeat. Kivra, the dragon child, had grown stronger, her scales glinting faintly in the pale sunlight that filtered through frosted windows. She moved with more confidence now, testing her wings and stepping carefully over the scattered toys. Relon watched her quietly, his hands busy repairing small mechanical animals and toys. Every so often, Kivra would pause, tilt her head, and look at him with eyes that seemed to hold far more than her small body suggested. There was intelligence there, yes, but also memory, fragments of a past he could not yet understand. One evening, as the workshop lights dimmed and the coil glowed softly, Kivra shifted closer to the heater. Her wings curled around her body, and her small claw rested on a pile of old toy gears. A soft hum escaped her throat, vibrating through the floor. Relon paused in his work. He had noticed this before. Her energy seemed to respond to movement, to warmth, and to the machines he repaired. It was as if she could bring life to the broken things around her. "You're special, Kivra," he said softly. "I don't know what you are exactly, but you've survived, and you're helping these old toys come alive." Kivra tilted her head, blinking. Then she made a small gesture with her claw, tracing patterns on the table. Sparks leapt from a nearby toy as she touched it, and it whirred softly before stopping again. Her amber eyes met his. She was showing him something, an ability, a memory, a piece of herself he could not yet grasp. That night, Relon lay awake on the floor beside her, listening to her quiet breaths. He noticed small flickers of movement. A toy's light flickered without his touch, a small gear spun slowly on its own. Kivra's energy was spreading in the room. It was subtle but undeniable. She was not just a child in need of warmth, she had power. The next day he tried speaking to her about it. "Kivra, can you show me what you remember?" She tilted her head again, then closed her eyes. Her body glowed faintly, a soft golden shimmer. The air around them seemed to respond, tingling against his skin. Relon watched, fascinated and cautious. Images formed in his mind, not as words but as feelings, flashes and colors. He saw a landscape of jagged cliffs, rivers of molten light, and skies streaked with fire. He saw other dragons, larger than Kivra, moving with grace and purpose. He saw destruction too, buildings collapsing, smoke rising, a great fire sweeping across a settlement. Kivra shivered and opened her eyes. Her gaze was distant, yet focused. Relon realized she was showing him memories, her memories. You were hurt," he said carefully. "Someone took your family?" She nodded once. A low, mournful sound escaped her throat. Then she pointed to a small metal figure on the table, one Relon had made for her. It was a toy dragon, silver with tiny gears for wings. "You're safe here," he whispered. "No one will hurt you now. I promise." Kivra moved closer, wrapping her small wings around his arm. The warmth from her body mingled with the coil, filling the room. For the first time, Relon felt that she trusted him completely. Over the next days, Relon observed more of her abilities. Kivra could sense temperature changes and respond to energy sources. Broken devices started to function when she touched them. She could manipulate small electrical currents, enough to power lights or move mechanical parts. It was subtle but powerful. Relon realized that Kivra's memory of her past, combined with her innate abilities, made her unique. She was not just a survivor, she was a being capable of changing her environment and perhaps, in time, helping the settlement itself. One night, the wind howled outside and a patrol drone scanned the neighborhood. Relon dimmed the lights and pulled Kivra close. She hummed softly and pressed her head to his chest. Then, something remarkable happened. The coil's glow intensified without his touch. The energy flowed outward, creating a small barrier of warmth that kept the cold from seeping in through the cracks in the walls. Relon's jaw dropped. "You're protecting us," he said. "Even when you're small you can do this?" Kivra nodded, then rested her head back on the blankets. The coil dimmed slightly, responding to her movement. She was learning control even at this young age. As days turned to a week, Relon and Kivra fell into a routine. She slept on the pile of blankets beside the coil. He repaired toys, feeding her scraps of food and teaching her simple things about trust and communication. And in return she shared fragments of her memory in small bursts, gestures, sounds and subtle energy flows that showed him the world she had lost. Relon realized something profound. Kivra's story was not just about loss. It was about survival, resilience, and the power of a child, human or dragon, to endure and adapt. Her abilities could change the world around them if she learned to control them. But more importantly, she had learned to trust a human. Outside, the settlement continued as usual. People went about their routines, unaware of the small dragon child living in Relon's workshop. Patrols passed by, rumors spread, but no one suspected the truth. Kivra could not speak the human language well, but her gestures and energy communicated volumes. She remembered her past, her pain and her family, but she also began to see a future with Relon. One evening, as snow fell lightly again, Kivra rested on the blankets and reached out a claw to touch Relon's hand. She hummed a soft, musical sound. Relon smiled, feeling warmth spread through him beyond the coil's glow. "You remember?" he said quietly. "You remember everything, but you're safe here now. We can face the future together." Her small wings trembled, then relaxed. She leaned closer. Relon understood then that this bond was not just survival or protection. It was connection. It was trust. It was the first step toward a life neither of them had imagined. One where human and dragon could exist side by side, sharing warmth, care, and perhaps, one day, hope. And as the workshop lights glowed softly and the wind whispered against the walls, Relon knew one truth above all. Kivra remembered everything, but she had chosen to trust him. And that choice would change everything. The morning was quiet, but the calm was deceptive. Relon had noticed unusual movements outside the workshop for days. Patrol drones hovered low, their lights scanning every alley. Word of a dragon child in the settlement had spread, and humans who feared dragons were growing bold. Today that fear had turned into action. A loud knock shook the metal door. Relon froze. Kivra, curled near the energy coil, hissed softly, her wings lifting in warning. He moved quickly, pulling the blankets around her and dimming the workshop lights. "Open the door, human," a stern voice called. "We know a dragon is inside. Hand it over immediately." Relon's jaw tightened. The voice came from the settlement authorities, the same people who had ignored patrol warnings and rumors. They carried scanners, weapons, and determination. He looked down at Kivra. She was calm now, her amber eyes focused, but her small wings twitched nervously. Relon knelt beside her. "Stay close," he whispered. "I will not let them take you." Another knock came, louder this time, shaking the metal walls. "We will not ask again. You know the laws. Dragons are a threat. Hand it over or face consequences." Relon's mind raced. He had no weapons, no reinforcements, no power beyond the coil and his own wits. But he had something far more important. Trust. The dragon child had chosen him. He would not betray that. He stood slowly, hands raised to show he meant no harm. "You don't understand," he said. "This isn't a weapon. This is a child. She's hurt, she's scared, and she has no one else. I am protecting her." The officers hesitated, scanning him and the dimly lit room. Their scanners picked up Kivra's small body, her energy flickering in the corner. One of them muttered, "That's impossible. She's controlling energy. Is she alive?" Kivra stepped forward, her small wings spreading slightly. A gentle heat radiated from her, soft but noticeable. The cold in the room seemed to lift, brushing away frost and tension. The officers shivered, surprised. "She is just a child," Relon continued. "She's not a threat. I've kept her alive. I've helped her. That's all I've done." One officer, younger and less confident, glanced at the others. "But she's a dragon. She could be something good," Relon interrupted firmly. If you give her a chance. Look at her. She is alive because of kindness, not violence. We can protect her together without fear. Kivra stepped closer to Relon, the warmth from her body spreading like sunlight through the workshop. Slowly she raised a small claw and pointed to the icy street outside. Sparks of energy flickered faintly around her, enough to melt frost and create a clear path. The officer stepped back in surprise. A child, no bigger than a human 6-year-old, had turned the frozen street into something safe. No one was harmed. No one burned. Just warmth. The leader of the patrol swallowed hard. That's extraordinary, he muttered. We were told she was dangerous. That she could. She could, Relon said, but she chooses not to hurt anyone. She chooses life, not fear. Isn't that what we want for this settlement? Silence filled the room. The other officers looked at each other, unsure. Their training had taught them to see dragons as threats. Their orders demanded caution. But here in front of them was proof that fear had lied. Kivra moved slowly, touching the energy coil, then reaching toward the officers. Her warmth was gentle, her gesture innocent. She did not attack, did not threaten. She only offered trust. One officer stepped forward, slowly. Maybe we judged too quickly, he said. She saved the street, the people trapped by ice. She is a child. The leader's jaw tightened, but he looked at Kivra, then at Relon and nodded slowly. Very well, he said. We will not take her. But know this, you both are under observation. Any threat and we act immediately. Relon exhaled, relief washing over him. He knelt beside Kivra, who rested her head against his chest. The warmth from her body, from the coil, from their bond, filled the workshop. You did it, he whispered. You showed them who you really are. Kivra made a soft, happy sound, brushing her small claw against his arm. Her wings twitched, then relaxed. The threat had passed, but Relon knew this was only the beginning. The world outside remained cautious, suspicious, and fearful. But for now they had a choice. They could continue to hide or they could step into the future together. Relon looked around the workshop at the scattered toys, the broken machines, and the small pile of blankets that had become Kivra's bed. We'll be careful, he said. But we will not run forever. You have power, yes, but more than that, you have trust. And that changes everything. Kivra pressed her head closer, her body glowing faintly, responding to his words. The warmth filled the room and stretched beyond it, brushing the walls, the floor, even the windows. It was not fire, not heat from a machine, but something deeper. Something living. Outside, the settlement began to stir. Rumors of the dragon child spread, but those who saw the frost melting and the frozen streets clearing began to doubt old fears. Humans whispered to one another. Perhaps the child was not a threat. Perhaps there was more to dragons than the stories claimed. Relon and Kivra stayed together that day, watching the streets from the workshop window. He repaired toys, she hummed softly, and the warmth never faded. They had faced fear, authority, and expectation, and they had stood firm. And in that quiet, tense victory, Relon realized something important. Trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned. And Kivra had earned it, not just from him but from everyone who had witnessed her choice. By nightfall, the workshop glowed softly, alive with warmth, energy, and quiet understanding. Kivra curled beside Relon, small wings draped over his arm. He felt her warmth in his bones, her trust in his heart, and the truth of the moment settled on him. No one had expected this choice. Not the authorities. Not the world. Not even he. But it was theirs. And together they had made it. The first step toward a future no one could have predicted had been taken. A human and a dragon child, side by side, proving that courage, care, and trust were stronger than fear. Outside, the stars blinked coldly, unaware that a small spark had begun in the workshop, one that could change everything. The sun rose over the settlement, pale and weak, but it brought a new light to the workshop. Relon and Kivra had spent the night talking in gestures, soft hums, and small touches. The warmth from the energy coil had not faded, and the bond between them had grown stronger. Outside, the world was still wary, but inside, the workshop had become a place of safety and possibility. Relon looked at Kivra, who was stretching her wings and testing her strength. She moved with grace now, her scales catching the early light. He had watched her grow stronger every day, not just in body but in confidence and understanding. She trusted him and he trusted her. That trust had changed everything. Suddenly, a loud rumble shook the ground. Outside, a section of the settlement had been trapped under ice during the last storm. Civilians were calling for help, their voices echoing through the streets. Relon froze. He had no plan, no real way to help them quickly. But Kivra had already taken action. She stepped toward the door, small claws clicking on the metal floor. Her body glowed faintly and warmth spread outward, reaching the walls and floor. The ice outside began to melt slowly, then faster, until clear paths formed. People could move freely, escaping the frozen trap. Relon's jaw dropped. You're doing it," he whispered. Kivra glanced at him, then focused again on the street. Sparks of energy traveled from her wings into the frozen blocks, turning ice into water, creating safe paths. She did not harm anyone, not even the patrol drones that hovered nearby. Her power was controlled, precise, and gentle. News of the Dragon Child spread quickly. Crowds gathered in the streets, watching the ice melt before their eyes. Fearful whispers turned to astonished murmurs. The authorities arrived, but instead of weapons they saw hope. The patrol leader stepped forward, slowly raising his hands. She saved the people," he admitted. "She is not a threat." Relon stood beside her, proud and exhausted. "She is a child," he said firmly. "She is not dangerous. She is kind, brave, and wise. She chose to help." Kivra looked at him, her amber eyes shining. She stepped forward again, gently touching the ground, sending warmth into the frozen street. People gasped in amazement. The snow and ice melted at her touch, leaving the streets clear and safe. One young child ran forward, clapping hands. "She's amazing," the child shouted. Adults smiled, some hesitant, others in disbelief. The stories of dragons being dangerous seemed smaller now, replaced by the sight of a small, gentle dragon who saved lives. Relon knelt beside Kivra. "You see," he whispered, "people are starting to understand." She pressed her head against his arm, warm and steady. The energy coil in the workshop had been nothing compared to her own power. It had taken courage to trust, and now her choice had changed more than just their workshop. It had changed hearts. In the following days, more dragons emerged from hiding. They had observed from afar, unsure if humans could be trusted. Seeing Kivra, a child, work with Relon, and seeing her help without harm, they began to approach. Slowly contact was made. Relon's workshop became a meeting place. Humans and dragons gathered, sharing knowledge and learning from one another. Kivra guided them, showing small tricks of energy control, teaching patience, and demonstrating the balance between power and care. Authorities watched cautiously, but they could not deny the truth. The settlement had survived storms, ice, and fear because a human had chosen compassion over rules, and a dragon had chosen trust over instinct. One evening, Relon and Kivra stood outside the workshop, looking over the city. The streets were no longer frozen. Lights shone brightly. Children played, both human and small dragons, learning together. The settlement hummed with life. "You see what we've done?" Relon asked quietly. "A child and a broken old Toymaker, and yet we've made a difference." Kivra hummed softly, pressing her warm body against his side. Her wings flared slightly, casting golden light over the street below. "Not just a difference," Relon added. "We've changed minds. We've shown that humans and dragons can work together. That fear doesn't have to rule the world." Kivra lifted her head and tapped his arm gently, communicating her agreement. Together they had not only survived, they had inspired a community, bridged the gap between species, and begun something that could last generations. Months passed. The settlement became a hub of cooperation. Humans learned dragon techniques, dragons learned human tools. Children of both species grew up together, sharing stories, games, and knowledge. Relon continued to repair and build, teaching and guiding. Kivra grew stronger every day, her powers controlled and purposeful. At night, Relon would sit beside her watching the stars. The energy from her body mixed with the quiet hum of the workshop, creating a peaceful rhythm that calmed both human and dragon. She had grown beyond fear and weakness, and he had learned the strength of compassion and trust. One evening, as the auroras danced across the sky, Kivra pressed her head to his chest. Relon smiled, feeling the warmth in his bones, the pride in his heart. "We've done it," he whispered. "We've changed the world just a little, but it matters. And we'll keep going. Together." Kivra closed her eyes, her energy glowing softly. She had survived, learned, and trusted. And together, they had shown the universe something humans had always known but often forgot. That courage, care, and warmth could accomplish more than fear, strength, or weapons ever could. Outside, the settlement slept under the auroras, safe and alive. Inside, the small workshop glowed with warmth, trust, and hope. A human and a dragon child had begun a new story. One that would be told for generations. A story of survival, kindness, and the power of a bond that could change worlds. And in the quiet, Relon realized a simple truth. The warmth they shared was stronger than any winter, brighter than any fear, and capable of lighting the path to a future neither species could have imagined alone. They had begun something extraordinary. And it was only the beginning.